The emergency alarms echoed through the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council for the first time in 3,000 years. Representatives from 200 species materialized in their designated platforms. Confusion and concern rippling through the assembly. Ambassador Calethius of the Zelthian Empire stood at the center podium, his crystalline form pulsing with angry red light. 3 days ago, the mining fleet belonging to my people was completely destroyed, Kelthus announced. His voice transmitted through universal translators to every corner of the massive chamber. 47 ships. 3,000 souls. Gone in minutes. The perpetrators were human vessels operating from the third planet of a system they call Sol. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Many representatives had never heard of humans. Earth was a backwater world that had only achieved faster than light travel 2 centuries ago. They were newcomers, barely worth noticing in a galaxy filled with civilizations millions of years old. "This is clearly a misunderstanding," said Ambassador Threva, a tall being covered in silver feathers. "Perhaps your fleet strayed into their territory by accident. We should open diplomatic channels immediately." Kelthius's form flashed brighter. "Our fleet was mining a cluster of asteroids in neutral space. These humans attacked without provocation, without warning. They must be held accountable. We demand the Council take immediate action," the Council's chief administrator, an ancient being whose species had founded the Council 40,000 years ago, raised one of its many appendages. "The protocol is clear. We will send a diplomatic delegation to Earth. They will be asked to present their case before this Council. Negotiation will resolve this matter as it has resolved all matters for millennia. This was the way things worked. When conflicts arose, species came before the Council, explained their positions, and through patient discussion, a solution was found. Sometimes it took years, but negotiation always worked. The alternative was chaos, and the galaxy had left chaos behind long ago. The delegation was prepared within hours. 12 ambassadors, each from a different species, each trained in the ancient arts of diplomacy. They would travel to Earth, meet with human leaders, and explain how the Council operated. The humans would understand. Everyone understood eventually. But the delegation never reached Earth. 2 days later, every screen in Council space activated simultaneously. Communication systems across 200 homeworlds were overridden by a signal of impossible strength. Representatives attending the follow-up session in the Grand Chamber watched their displays flicker and change. A human woman appeared on every screen. She wore a dark uniform with insignia that meant nothing to the Council members. Her face was calm, almost bored. Behind her, stars moved past windows that suggested she was on a ship. "This message is for the Galactic Council," the woman said in perfect galactic standard, though her accent was strange. "I am Admiral Sarah, Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your delegation was intercepted at the boundary of our space and turned back. We have scanned your ships and your databases. We know who you are and how you operate." The Grand Chamber fell silent. No one interrupted Council communications. It was simply not done. The technology required would be staggering, and the audacity even more so. "You want us to come and explain ourselves?" Chen continued. "You want negotiation. Here is our negotiation. The Zelthian fleet entered a zone we had marked as restricted. We provided warnings in 17 different languages and formats. These warnings were ignored. We disabled the lead ships and repeated our warnings. When the fleet continued advancing, we destroyed it. This was not murder. This was defense of our territory." Kelthus's crystalline body was now glowing bright red. He opened his mouth to speak, but Chen was not finished. "We have examined your Council's history. We have read your treaties and your laws. We understand your system. Here's what you need to understand about us. We do not recognize your authority. We did not ask to join your Council. We will not submit to your laws. And we will not come to your chambers to be judged." The silence in the Grand Chamber was absolute. In 40,000 years, no species had ever refused a Council summons. The very concept was alien to everyone present. "Our space is clearly marked," Chen said. Any vessel that crosses into our territory without explicit permission will be disabled and turned back. Any vessel that refuses to turn back will be destroyed. We will not explain ourselves. We will not apologize. We will not negotiate. This is simply how things are. The transmission ended. The screens returned to normal. For several long moments, nobody spoke. Then the chamber erupted into chaos. "This is an outrage," Kelthus shouted. "They admit to destroying my fleet and show no remorse. We must respond with force." "We cannot simply attack them," Threva argued. "We do not know their capabilities. We must try again to establish dialogue." "Dialogue?" Another ambassador called out. "They just refused dialogue. How do we negotiate with a species that refuses to negotiate?" The chief administrator raised several appendages, calling for order. The noise gradually subsided. "This is unprecedented," the ancient being admitted, "but there must be a solution." "There is always a solution through negotiation." They said they scanned our databases, a small, timid ambassador noted. "What if they know things about us we would prefer they did not?" "Impossible," another responded. "Our security is absolute." But even as the words were spoken, new reports began filtering into the chamber. Human ships were being detected across a vast region of space, all of them surrounding the area known as Sol System. They were not just defending a single planet. They were establishing a perimeter around multiple star systems. "They are building a wall," Threva whispered, studying the incoming data. "They are cutting themselves off from the rest of the galaxy, or cutting us off from them," someone else suggested. The chief administrator studied the reports with growing concern. The human ships were massive, far larger than their brief history of spaceflight should have allowed. The weapons platforms they were installing generated power signatures that matched Council military stations. How did they advance so quickly? Kelthus demanded. They should not have this technology. A Threne observer, a species known for their careful study of others, spoke up. His voice was quiet but clear. "Perhaps we should ask a different question. Not how did they advance so quickly, but why did we not notice them until now?" The question hung in the air. Earth had been exploring space for 200 years. They had faster-than-light capability. They should have been detected, contacted, integrated into Council systems. Instead, they had developed in isolation until they were strong enough that contact happened on their terms, not the Council's. "We must make them understand," the chief administrator finally said. "We must show them the benefits of cooperation, of being part of the galactic community." But several ambassadors were looking at the data feeds, at the expanding human perimeter, at the cold efficiency of their military deployment. These were not the actions of a species that could be persuaded. These were the actions of a species that had already made its decision. Threva spoke what many were thinking. What if they simply do not want what we are offering? The question had no answer. In 40,000 years of Council history, every species had wanted membership. The benefits were obvious: trade, technology sharing, mutual defense, cultural exchange. Who would refuse such things? Apparently, humans would. As the session dissolved into arguments and speculation, Admiral Chen's ship continued its patrol of the human perimeter. She had told them the truth. Now they would learn if they could accept it. 3 factions emerged in the Council chambers within a week of Admiral Chen's message. The division was clear and growing worse by the day. The militarists, led by Ambassador Kelthus and his Zelthian supporters, demanded immediate action. "We cannot allow this insult to stand," Kelthus argued before the assembled council. "If one species can refuse our authority, others will follow. The entire system will collapse. We must show strength now before this disease spreads." Across the chamber, the traditionalists maintained their position. Ambassador Threva stood as their voice. "Violence is not the answer. It has never been the answer. For 40,000 years, we have resolved conflicts through patience and understanding. These humans are simply afraid. They do not understand us yet. We must persist in our diplomatic efforts." But a third group was growing, one that made both other factions uncomfortable. The realists, as they called themselves, suggested something that bordered on heresy. "Perhaps," said Ambassador Corthan of the Dravix Confederation, We should simply leave them alone. The suggestion was met with shocked silence. Leave them alone? Kelthus repeated, his crystalline form pulsing with disbelief. You would reward their aggression with compliance? I would acknowledge reality, Korthon replied calmly. They have made their position clear. They have the military strength to enforce it. They want nothing from us. What exactly do we gain by forcing the issue? The chief administrator ended the debate before it could devolve into chaos. We will try every diplomatic option available to us. This is the council way, and try they did. The council assembled a new delegation. This time, instead of ambassadors, they sent scholars and scientists, all unarmed, all broadcasting messages of peace and curiosity. The ships carried no weapons, only gifts, cultural artifacts from across the galaxy, technological blueprints, artistic masterpieces from 1,000 worlds. The delegation crossed into human, space-transmitting friendship on every frequency. They were destroyed within minutes. No warning, no negotiation, just cold, efficient destruction. The only message returned was brief. You were warned. The boundary is absolute. The council recoiled in horror. These were not soldiers or diplomats. These were academics, teachers, artists. Their deaths sent shockwaves through council space. Now will you see? Kelthus demanded. They are monsters. They must be stopped. But the traditionalists refused to give up. We must have done something wrong. Perhaps our approach was flawed. We should offer them technology, advanced medicine, access to our trade networks. The offer was carefully crafted and transmitted to Earth. It promised extraordinary benefits, immortality treatments, clean energy systems, access to the collective knowledge of 200 civilizations. The message outlined how Earth could become a full council member with all privileges and protections. The offer was deleted without being opened. Automated systems confirmed it never reached a human reader. They do not even look at our proposals, Thriva said quietly, studying the data. How do we negotiate with someone who refuses to acknowledge our existence? The council tried economic pressure next. They announced sanctions against Earth, prohibiting trade with human worlds. The announcement was met with silence from humanity and confusion from council members who pointed out that Earth had never engaged in trade with anyone. They were completely self-sufficient. The sanctions were meaningless. Threats came next. The council invoked ancient laws, treaties going back thousands of years. They declared Earth in violation of galactic order. They threatened military action, economic isolation, cultural quarantine. Each threat was transmitted formally through every channel. None received any response. They do not care, Korthon observed during an emergency session. We keep acting as if our opinions matter to them. They have demonstrated clearly that they do not. Meanwhile, human expansion continued. The perimeter around their space grew larger each day. They were not conquering territory or claiming new worlds. They were simply establishing a buffer zone between themselves and the rest of the galaxy. Any ship that came too close vanished. No wreckage was ever found. No distress calls were received. Ships simply stopped existing. Reports came in from across the border regions. Merchant vessels that strayed off course disappeared. Explorer ships investigating the human zone never returned. The council launched investigations, sent search parties, demanded explanations. The humans provided none. The Threen observer who had spoken during the first session requested permission to address the full council. His name was Vareth, and his species had been quietly studying humanity since their first detection decades ago. We have made a fundamental error, Vareth said, his voice calm but firm. We assume the humans are like us. We assume they want what we want. We assume they think as we think. All of these assumptions are wrong. He displayed data his people had collected. Humans have been spacefaring for 200 years. In that time, they have not sought contact with other species. They have not sent peaceful messages to the stars. They have explored silently, carefully, learning about us while revealing nothing about themselves. The data showed human observation posts scattered throughout nearby space. They had been watching the council for decades. They knew about us before we knew about them, Vareth continued. They studied our methods, our politics, our history. Then they made a decision. They decided they did not want to be part of our system. That is not possible, the chief administrator said. Every species wants to be part of the galactic community. Vareth replied. Every species we have encountered has been weaker than us, more divided than us, or less advanced than us. Every species has needed what we offer. The humans do not need us. They evaluated membership in the council and determined it was not worth the cost. Cost? Thriva asked. What cost? We offer only benefits. Vareth's expression was difficult to read, but his tone was sad. We offer benefits in exchange for compliance. We offer membership in exchange for following our rules. The humans examined our history and saw that every species that joins the council gradually becomes more like the council. Individual cultures fade. Independent thinking diminishes. Everything becomes standardized, regulated, controlled. That is cooperation, Kelthus argued. That is civilization. That is assimilation, Vareth countered. And the humans want no part of it. The chamber fell silent. The Thren observer's words cut through decades of comfortable assumptions. The council had always believed they were offering salvation to less advanced species. The idea that someone might reject that offer, might see it as something to avoid rather than embrace, was almost incomprehensible. So what do we do? Someone asked. If they will not talk, will not trade, will not join, what options remain? War, Kelthus said. We show them they cannot simply opt out of galactic civilization. Acceptance, Korthon countered. We acknowledge their choice and respect their boundaries. Understanding, Thriva suggested. We continue trying to reach them, to show them we mean no harm. The chief administrator looked at the three factions. At the divided council, at the reports of missing ships and expanding human territory. For the first time in millennia, there was no clear consensus. No obvious path forward. The system that had governed the galaxy for 40,000 years was encountering something. It could not process a species that genuinely did not want to be processed. We'll continue diplomatic efforts, the chief administrator finally decreed, but we will also begin assembling a military response. The humans must be made to understand that they cannot simply ignore the council. Vareth left the chamber quietly, his warning unheeded. As he walked through the corridors, he accessed the latest reports. 3 more ships had vanished near human space. The buffer zone had expanded by another light year. And through it all, the humans maintained their silence. They had said everything they needed to say. The council simply refused to listen. The fractures in the council grew deeper each day. What had started as a simple enforcement matter had become something far more dangerous. Species that had coexisted peacefully for thousands of years eyed each other with suspicion. The Zelthian Empire moved first, though they tried to keep it secret. Ambassador Kelthus convinced his government that waiting for council consensus would take too long. The humans needed to be taught a lesson immediately, before their defiance inspired others. His people had suffered losses. Honor demanded response. The Zelthian military began assembling a strike fleet in deep space, far from council oversight. 400 warships, each one a masterpiece of destruction accumulated over 10,000 years of technological advancement. It was the largest military force assembled in 3,000 years. Since the last time a species had dared challenge council authority, but secrets were hard to keep in council space. Within days, other species learned of the fleet. Some were horrified. Others were quietly supportive. A few began wondering if they should contribute ships of their own. The Avery, a philosophical species who had always been among the council's most devoted supporters, began asking uncomfortable questions in their own chambers. If negotiation is truly the highest form of civilization, High Speaker asked, why does it require the threat of overwhelming force to work? The question spread. Across council space, species that had accepted the system without question for generations suddenly found themselves doubting. Not loudly, not openly, but in private conversations, in classified government meetings, in academic discussions. The same thoughts kept arising. What if the humans were right? Smaller species that had always relied on council protection started calculating their own vulnerabilities. If the humans could refuse the council, if they could establish their own territory and defend it, what was stopping anyone else from doing the same? The entire structure of galactic civilization rested on the assumption that the council's way was the only way. The humans had shattered that assumption simply by existing. The Zelthian strike fleet launched without council authorization. Kelthus presented it as a fait accompli during an emergency session. By the time you debate, we will have already resolved the matter. The humans will either surrender or be destroyed. Either way, the council's authority will be restored. The chief administrator was furious, but the damage was done. The fleet was already in motion, accelerating toward human space. All the council could do was monitor the situation and hope for a quick resolution. The fleet was massive, powerful, and confident. They had faced minor conflicts over the millennia, putting down pirate groups or rebellious colonies. None had ever lasted more than a few hours against concentrated council military power. The Zelthian commanders expected the humans to either flee or surrender. The moment they saw the fleet's size, human sensors detected the fleet 3 days before it reached their territory. Admiral Chen watched the data feeds from the command deck of her flagship. 400 ships. Impressive by council standards, primitive by human standards. "Send the standard warning," she ordered. The message was brief. "Zelthian fleet, you're approaching restricted space. Turn back now. This is your final warning." The Zelthian commander, a veteran of a dozen minor conflicts, sneered at the message. "They are trying to frighten us. Continue forward. Battle speed." The fleet crossed the boundary line. Human defense platforms powered up, their energy signatures suddenly visible across every frequency. The Zelthian sensors registered the readings with confusion. Those power levels should not be possible. "Weapons free," Admiral Chen said calmly. "Standard engagement protocol. No survivors." The battle lasted 17 minutes. The Zelthian fleet had numbers and experience. The human defenders had technology the Council had not seen before, and tactics they had never imagined. Human ships were smaller but faster. Their weapons hit harder and reloaded faster. Most terrifying of all was their coordination. Every human vessel moved as if controlled by a single mind. Though the Zelthians' attempts to jam communications proved they were all independent, the humans did not disable ships. They did not target weapons or engines. They went for complete destruction. Each Zelthian vessel was systematically torn apart, its crew given no chance to surrender or retreat. When a ship tried to flee, it was prioritized and destroyed first. The Council watched it all happen in real time. Every Council species monitoring the battle witnessed their comfortable assumptions about military power evaporate. The Zelthian fleet had been the pride of their empire accumulated over millennia. It was gone in the time it took to have a short conversation. When the last Zelthian ship exploded, silence filled every council chamber. 400 ships, 12,000 crew, all dead. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. Then Admiral Chen's face appeared on every screen in council space again. This time, she looked different. Not bored, not calm, angry. "You were warned," she said, her voice cold. "We told you to stay out. We told you what would happen. You chose not to listen. This is what happens when you do not listen." She paused, letting the images of destroyed Zelthian ships fill the screens behind her. "We are not interested in your politics. We are not interested in your laws. We are not interested in your authority. We defend our space with absolute force. This is not negotiable. This is not a threat. This is simply fact." Then Chen did something that terrified the Council more than the battle itself. She transmitted complete technical specifications for human weapon systems, power outputs, firing rates, shield frequencies, ship designs, everything. "We are sharing this information so there is no confusion," Chen explained. "We do not hide our capabilities because we do not fear you. These are our weapons. This is our fleet strength. These are our defensive positions. You now know exactly what you would face if you attack us again. Make your decisions accordingly." The transmission ended. The data packages finished downloading to every major government in Council space. Military analysts across 200 worlds began frantically studying the information, hoping to find weaknesses. Instead, they found only confirmations of their worst fears. The humans were not bluffing. If anything, they were probably holding back. The council chamber convened an emergency session within the hour. Ambassador Kelthus was gone, recalled to his homeworld in disgrace. His people were in mourning, their fleet destroyed, their warriors dead. The militarist faction had been completely discredited, but the damage went far beyond one species' humiliation. 3 major council species announced they were withdrawing from the council's military command structure. They would maintain diplomatic ties, but they would no longer contribute ships or resources to council's security forces. The message was clear. If the council could not protect them from humans, they would protect themselves. 2 species that shared borders with human. Space began constructing their own defensive perimeters, not to contain humanity, to prevent other council species from provoking the humans through their territory. They wanted no part of any future conflicts. Ambassador Threva addressed the council, her voice shaking. "We have maintained peace for 40,000 years through negotiation and consensus. One species in mere weeks has shattered that peace. How did we fail so completely?" Vareth, the Threen observer, rose to speak. "We did not fail. We simply encountered something new. The council system works when everyone involved needs what the council provides. The humans need nothing we offer. They have evaluated us and found us wanting." "That is impossible," the chief administrator said, but the words lacked conviction. "We offer technology, culture, protection, unity. Who would not want these things?" "Someone who already has them," Vareth replied. "Someone who has seen the price of council membership and decided it is too high." The chamber erupted in arguments. Some demanded renewed military action despite the obvious futility. Others insisted diplomacy must continue. A growing number, though they dared not say it openly, were beginning to wonder if the humans had a point. As the session devolved into chaos, reports came in from across council space. Minor species were reassessing their relationships with the council. Trade agreements were being renegotiated. Defense pacts were being questioned. The absolute authority the council had enjoyed for millennia was crumbling, not because of external conquest, but because one species had demonstrated that alternatives existed. Admiral Chen watched the chaos from her command deck, monitoring the data streams from council space. Her second officer approached cautiously. "Ma'am, they are falling apart," No Chen replied. "They are waking up. For thousands of years they have believed their way is the only way. Now they know differently. What they do with that knowledge is their choice." She returned her attention to the perimeter. The defense platforms were operating perfectly. The fleet was at full readiness, and beyond the boundary line. The galaxy was learning a lesson humanity had known for centuries. Peace based on force is temporary. Peace based on mutual respect lasts forever. The council had only ever known the former. Perhaps now they would learn about the latter. Vareth made the decision that would either enlighten the galaxy or end her career. She had watched the council spiral into confusion and chaos for weeks. She had seen species that had coexisted peacefully for millennia begin to eye each other with suspicion. The human question consumed everything, yet no one seemed willing to ask the humans themselves what they actually wanted. The Threen were observers by nature. They studied, analyzed, and understood. Vareth had spent decades studying humanity from afar, compiling data, building psychological profiles. She understood something her colleagues did not. The humans had already told the council everything they needed to know. The council simply refused to believe it, so she did something unauthorized, possibly illegal, and certainly dangerous. Using encrypted quantum channels that bypassed council monitoring, she transmitted a message to Earth. Simple, direct, just the way humans seem to prefer. "I wish to understand why." She expected no response. Species that refused all council contact would hardly respond to an individual's curiosity. But 3 hours later, her personal terminal received coordinates. A location outside council space, far from any established routes. Instructions: no weapons, no escorts, come alone. Vareth told no one where she was going. If this meeting went wrong, the council would be better off without her involvement. If it went right, she would have information that might prevent further bloodshed. The neutral space station was ancient, probably built by some long-dead civilization. It hung in the void between stars, maintained by automated systems that predated most of council history. Vareth's small ship docked carefully. Her sensors detected one other vessel, a human ship, compact and efficient like all their designs. Admiral Chen was waiting in what had once been a meeting room. She wore the same dark uniform from her broadcasts, though up close, Vareth could see she was younger than expected. Humans age differently than most species, but this woman could not have lived more than 50% of their years. Ambassador Vareth Chen said, pronouncing the three name perfectly. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for responding," Vareth replied, taking a seat across from the human. "I was not certain you would. You're the first to ask an honest question," Chen said. "Everyone else makes demands or offers deals. You just want to understand. That is worth responding to." Vareth settled into her seat, her mind already analyzing every detail. The human showed no fear, no aggression, just calm professionalism. "My people do not understand you. The council does not understand you. You have capabilities far beyond what your history suggests you should have. You refuse all contact while demonstrating that you have studied us extensively. Nothing about your behavior matches any established pattern. That is because you are looking at us through the wrong lens," Chen replied. "You keep trying to fit us into categories that do not apply." "Then help me understand," Vareth said. "Why will you not negotiate with the council? What do you want?" Chen leaned back in her chair. "We do not want anything from the council. That is what they cannot accept. They are so accustomed to being needed that they cannot process a species that does not need them. But negotiation is how civilizations interact," Vareth protested. "How problems are solved? How conflicts are prevented." "No," Chen said firmly. "Negotiation is a tool that works when both parties need something from each other and respect each other's right to refuse. The council stopped practicing real negotiation thousands of years ago. What do you call negotiation? Is actually coercion dressed up as consensus." She pulled up a holographic display between them. Files, documents, data, thousands. Upon thousands of records, we've analyzed every major council negotiation from the last 10,000 years, Chen continued. Every single one follows the same pattern. A weaker species has a problem. The council offers a solution. The species expresses concerns or requests modifications. The council makes minor cosmetic changes while keeping the core terms exactly as they want them. The species eventually accepts because the alternative is isolation, sanctions, or military pressure. You call this negotiation? We call it the illusion of choice. Vareth stared at the data scrolling past. Trade agreements, defense pacts, technology sharing arrangements, cultural exchange programs. All of them ending with the smaller species accepting council terms. But the council provides real benefits, Vareth argued, though her voice lacked conviction. Protection, technology, access to resources. At what cost? Chen asked. We studied the species that joined the council over the last millennium. Do you know what we found? Within 3 generations, their languages start to fade. Their cultural practices become standardized. Their art becomes derivative. Their entire civilization gradually transforms into something that looks and acts like every other council species. Chen pulled up more data. Cultural surveys, linguistic studies, artistic production analysis. The patterns were undeniable. The council does not just want cooperation, Chen said. It wants conformity. Every species must eventually think like you, act like you, operate like you. That is not negotiation. That is assimilation with a smile. Vareth felt something inside her crack. She had devoted her life to studying other species, to understanding the council's diplomatic successes. but she had never looked at it from this angle. Never asked what was lost when species joined the galactic community. We learned this lesson in our own history, Chen continued. Humans have always been divided. Thousands of cultures, hundreds of nations, countless different ways of thinking and living. For a long time, the powerful groups tried to make everyone else conform. It never worked. It just created resentment and conflict. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. We learned that real peace comes from respecting differences, not erasing them. From allowing people to say no without punishing them for it. From understanding that cooperation only works when both parties genuinely choose it, not when one party has no other option. So you refuse the council because you fear losing your identity? Vareth asked. We refused the council because we studied your history and saw the truth you refused to see, Chen replied. Every species that joins the council eventually becomes the council. Individual thinking disappears. Innovation slows. Everything becomes safe, regulated, predictable. That is not progress. That is stagnation. Vareth stood and approached the window, standing beside the human. What if you are wrong? What if the council's way truly is better? Then we will discover that on our own, Chen said. But it will be our discovery, our choice. Not something imposed on us by beings who believe they know better. The council will not stop, Vareth said quietly. They cannot accept a species that stands outside their system. It threatens everything they believe. I know, Chen replied. That is why we established such strong defenses. That is why we made our capabilities public. We are not trying to fight the council. We are trying to make them understand that fighting us is pointless. She turned to face Varath directly. We do not want to destroy the council. We do not want to conquer territory or spread our influence. We just want to be left alone to develop in our own way, at our own pace, according to our own values. Is that really so threatening? Vareth did not answer immediately. She thought about the chaos in council chambers, the fracturing alliances, the species beginning to question everything they had been taught. The humans had not attacked the council. They had simply held up a mirror, and the council did not like what it saw. I need to show them this, Vareth said finally, gesturing to the data. They need to see themselves through your eyes. Will they believe you? Chen asked. I do not know, Vareth admitted, but I have to try. Chen nodded and transferred all the data to Vareth's systems. Thousands of years of council history analyzed through human perspective. Every negotiation dissected. Every pattern exposed. It was damning evidence that the council had lost its way if it had ever been on the right path to begin with. One more question, Vareth said as she prepared to leave. If you want to be left alone, why are you talking to me? Chen smiled for the first time. Because you asked an honest question, and because someone in the council needs to understand what is happening. The galaxy is changing. The council can change with it, or it can break trying to prevent it. We would prefer it changes. But that choice is yours, not ours. Vareth returned to her ship and began the journey back to council space. The data Chen had given her filled her screens. Each file another piece of evidence that the council's grand experiment in Galactic harmony was built on foundations of sand. She knew what would happen when she presented this information. The traditionalists would deny it. The militarists would call it propaganda. But some would listen. Some would see the truth. And once seen, truth could not be unseen. The council had believed it represented the pinnacle of civilization. The humans had shown it was just another system, flawed like all systems, maintained not by superiority but by the absence of alternatives. Now an alternative existed, and the galaxy would never be the same. Vareth returned to council space, carrying information that would either reform the galaxy or destroy her career. She transmitted her report to the Grand Chamber and requested an emergency session. The council, desperate for any new perspective on the human situation, granted it immediately. The chamber was more crowded than usual. Representatives from species that rarely attended council sessions had arrived, all wanting to hear what the Threen observer had learned. The mood was tense. The council had been in crisis mode for months, its authority crumbling, its member species increasingly divided. I met with the humans, Verith began, and the chamber immediately erupted with shouts. She waited for silence. I went alone, without authorization, because I believed we needed to understand them. And now I do. She activated the display. Data filled the air above the assembled representatives. Thousands of files. Decades of human analysis. Council history viewed through alien eyes. Humans have studied us extensively, Verith continued. They have analyzed every council negotiation from the last 10,000 years. And they have concluded that we do not actually negotiate. We coerce. This is absurd, someone shouted. We have maintained peace through consensus for 40 millennia. No, Verith replied calmly. We have maintained conformity through overwhelming pressure. There is a difference. She pulled up case after case. The patterns were undeniable. Smaller species approaching the council with problems, solutions offered that served council interests, token modifications made to create the illusion of compromise, acceptance eventually secured through implicit threats of isolation or explicit military pressure. Every species that joins the council gradually loses its identity, Verith said. Within generations, they speak our languages, follow our customs, think our thoughts. We have created a galaxy of copies, not a community of equals. The chief administrator rose. This is propaganda. The humans seek to divide us with lies. Then explain the Avery Reformation, Verith countered. Explain why the Dravix Confederation withdrew from military obligations. Explain why 36 species have renegotiated their council relationships in the last month. The humans did not cause these fractures. They revealed cracks that already existed. Ambassador Threva spoke up, her voice heavy with doubt. If what you say is true, what are we? What have we built? A system that worked as long as no one questioned it, Verith replied. The humans are not evil. They are not warlike. They are simply the first species we encountered that was strong enough to refuse us. And their refusal has forced everyone else to ask questions they never dared ask before. The chamber fell into heated debate. Some representatives denied everything Verith presented. Others studied the data with growing horror. A few quietly, yet admitted they had suspected these patterns for years, but never spoke up. Then something unexpected happened. The Avery High Speaker, whose species had been among the Council's most devoted supporters, requested the floor. Her people were philosophers, poets, thinkers. They had joined the Council 5,000 years ago and had always been model members. I have reviewed Ambassador Verith's data, the High Speaker said, and I have also reviewed our own history. Before joining the Council, my people produced great works of art and literature. We were known for our unique perspective on existence, our different way of seeing reality. That all stopped within 200 years of Council membership. She pulled up images. Ancient Avery art, strange and beautiful, and utterly alien. Then modern Avery art, which looked like art from any other Council species. We became successful Council members by becoming less Avery, she said. We thought this was progress. Perhaps it was just loss. Her words hung in the air. Other species began reviewing their own histories. The same patterns emerged again and again. Unique cultural elements fading. Distinctive viewpoints homogenizing. Everything gradually converging toward a Council standard. The militarist faction tried to regain control. Even if this is true, the solution is not to accept human defiance. We must enforce our rules, or have no rules at all. Why? Verith asked simply. Why must everyone follow our rules? The humans have demonstrated that other systems can work. They have peace, prosperity, and unity without Council membership. What gives us the right to force our way on them? The right of 40,000 years of successful civilization, the chief administrator declared. The right of overwhelming power, Verith corrected, which the humans have proven we no longer have, at least not over them. The debate raged for hours. But something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in millennia, Council members were questioning the basic assumptions of their entire system. The humans had not attacked these assumptions with weapons. They had simply refused to accept them. And that refusal had revealed how fragile the system really was. Finally, the chief administrator called for a vote. The motion, offer humanity full council membership with unprecedented autonomy and privileges. It was a desperate attempt to bring them into the fold, to prove the council could adapt. The offer was drafted carefully. Humans would be exempt from most council regulations. They would have veto power over any decisions affecting their space. They would maintain complete autonomy while enjoying all council benefits. It was the most generous offer ever extended to any species. The vote passed by a narrow margin. The offer was transmitted to Earth through every available channel. The council waited anxiously for a response. It came within hours. Admiral Chen appeared on screens across council space one final time. "We have reviewed your offer of council membership," she said. "Our answer is no. Not because your terms are unacceptable, but because we do not want what you are offering. We do not seek membership in your council. We do not recognize your authority over anyone, including yourselves. You are welcome to govern those who consent to your governance. Leave the rest of us alone." The words were direct and final, but Chen was not finished. "You have built a system that works for you. That is fine. But it is not the only system. It is not the best system. It is simply your system. We have our own system. Other species may develop their own systems. The galaxy is large enough for different approaches to civilization." She paused, and for a moment her expression softened slightly. "We do not hate the council. We do not wish you harm. We simply refuse to be part of something we do not believe in. That is our right. Respecting that right is the foundation of true peace." The transmission ended. The council chamber sat in stunned silence. The offer had been rejected. Not negotiated, not countered, just flatly refused. The humans did not want a seat at the table. They did not want a voice in council affairs. They simply wanted to be left alone. Vareth watched the reactions around her. Some representatives were angry. Others were confused. But a growing number looked thoughtful, almost relieved. The humans had given them permission to ask questions they had been afraid to voice. Over the following weeks, council began to fragment. Not violently, not dramatically, but steadily. 3 major species declared independence from council authority while maintaining friendly relations. Dozens of minor species renegotiated their relationships. Seeking more autonomy, more respect for their individual cultures, the council still existed. Its bureaucracy still operated. Its chambers still met regularly. But its absolute authority was gone. Species could now choose their level of involvement. They could say no without facing overwhelming pressure. The humans had not destroyed the council. They had simply proven that alternatives existed. Humanity maintained its perimeter and continued its isolation. They established treaties with individual species, but these were nothing like council agreements. They were simple, direct, and most importantly, they acknowledged that either party could walk away at any time. Some species found this uncomfortable. Others found it refreshing. The galaxy learned slowly, painfully, that peace could exist without absolute consensus. That cooperation did not require conformity. That different species could have different systems and still coexist. Vareth continued her work, focused on helping council species rediscover their own identities. The Avery began producing art that looked Avery again. The Draviks started teaching their old languages to their young. Across council space, cultures that had been fading began to revive. The chief administrator, in a rare moment of honesty, approached Vareth privately. "We believed we were bringing enlightenment to the galaxy. Were we wrong?" Vareth considered the question carefully. "You brought stability and peace. That was not wrong. But you also brought conformity. You assumed your way was the only way. The humans showed us that assumption was false." "What happens now?" the administrator asked. "Now we learn," Vareth replied. "We learn to respect differences instead of erasing them. We learn that negotiation means accepting when the other party says no. We learn that civilization has many forms, not just one." Far from council space, Admiral Chen watched the changes rippling through the galaxy. Her second officer asked if they had achieved their goal. "We never had a goal," Chen replied. "We just wanted to exist on our own terms." Everything else was their choice to make. They are changing because of us, No Chen corrected. They are changing because they finally have permission to question. We just held up a mirror. What they do with what they see is up to them. She turned back to her duties, managing the perimeter, protecting Earth's independence. The galaxy was learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. Nonetheless. And perhaps that was the greatest gift one civilization could give another. Not solutions. Not systems. Not salvation. Just the simple demonstration that alternatives existed, and the freedom to choose one's own path. The Council would survive. It would adapt. It would become something different. Perhaps something better. But it would never again assume that its way was the only way. Humanity had not negotiated with the Council. They had not joined it, reformed it, or destroyed it. They had simply existed outside it and proven that was possible. Sometimes, the most revolutionary act is not fighting the system. It is simply refusing to participate and living well without it.